Emma rushed into the crowded coffee shop, her mind racing with the presentation she needed to finish by noon. The line snaked around the small space, filled with impatient customers checking watches and phones. Behind her, a man in a worn gray hoodie and faded jeans shuffled in, eyes downcast, seemingly lost in thought. He looked tired, the kind of bone-deep exhaustion that coffee alone couldn't fix. When Emma reached the counter, she ordered her usual latte and hesitated, glancing back at the quiet man. Something about his distant expression tugged at her heart. "And whatever he's having too," she added impulsively, nodding toward the stranger. The barista raised an eyebrow but called out, "Sir? The lady's paying for your order." The man looked up, startled. For a brief moment, their eyes met. His were a striking blue, intelligent and somehow both weary and alert. He seemed about to protest, but Emma waved him off with a smile. "Pay it forward someday," she said, grabbing her coffee and hurrying out the door, already late for work. What Emma didn't know was that the man in the hoodie was Daniel Harrington, founder of Horizon Technologies and worth over $11 billion. What she couldn't have guessed was that he had spent the past 3 years hiding behind increasingly elaborate disguises, trying to find someone who would see him, really see him, not his wealth or power. Daniel watched her leave, the small act of kindness lingering in his mind long after the coffee was gone. Daniel hadn't always been wealthy. Born to working-class parents in a small Midwestern town, he'd built his tech empire from a college dorm room algorithm that revolutionized data security. By 32, he had more money than he could spend in 10 lifetimes. What he didn't have was someone to share it with. His last relationship had ended when he discovered his fiancée had been selling stories about their private life to tabloids. Before that, there had been the investment banker who saw him as a business opportunity, and the model who loved being photographed on his arm but couldn't name a single one of his interests. 3 years ago, Daniel had made a decision. He fired his personal assistants, moved out of his penthouse into a modest apartment registered under a different name, and began living 2 lives. By day, he ran his company remotely, appearing only for the most critical meetings. By night and weekends, he became just Dan, a regular guy in hoodies and jeans who rode the subway and ate at diners. He was searching for something real in a world that had become increasingly artificial to him. Emma Matthews worked as a graphic designer at a small marketing firm. At 28, she was talented but overlooked, her ideas often attributed to her more outspoken colleagues. Her apartment was tiny, her student loans substantial, and her dating life non-existent since breaking up with her college boyfriend 2 years ago. But Emma had something that Daniel had lost, genuine joy in small things. She volunteered at an animal shelter on weekends, maintained a close circle of loyal friends, and never missed her weekly video calls with her parents who had retired to Florida. The morning after their coffee shop encounter, Emma was surprised to see the same man enter her regular cafe. This time, he was ahead of her in line. When she reached the counter, the barista smiled. "The gentleman already paid for your order. Said something about paying it forward." Emma looked around but couldn't spot him. She felt an unexpected flutter of disappointment. The next day, he was there again. And the day after. Sometimes they exchanged small talk about the weather or commented on the cafe's eclectic music choices. He introduced himself simply as Dan. She found herself looking forward to these brief interactions, drawn to his thoughtful questions and the way he actually listened to her answers. 2 weeks into their morning ritual, Dan asked if she might want to grab lunch sometime. "I'd like that," Emma replied, surprising herself with how much she meant it. Their first date was at a small sandwich shop near the park. Emma arrived to find Dan already seated at a corner table, a paperback book open in front of him. "Sorry I'm late," she said, slightly out of breath. "Work crisis." "No problem," he smiled, closing his book. "I hope everything's okay." "Just the usual." Client changed their mind about the entire campaign concept the day before presentation. Dan nodded sympathetically. "That sounds frustrating." "It is, but that's the job. Emma shrugged. What about you? You've never actually told me what you do. Dan hesitated. I work in tech. Consulting, mostly. It wasn't exactly a lie, but it wasn't the whole truth either. Daniel had become adept at these partial truths over the years. Their conversation flowed easily from work to books to travel dreams. Emma talked about wanting to see Japan during cherry blossom season. Daniel, who owned a villa in Kyoto, simply nodded and said it was on his bucket list too. By the end of lunch, Emma felt a connection she hadn't experienced in years. Dan was different, thoughtful, present, and genuinely interested in her thoughts. When he asked if she'd like to meet again, her yes came without hesitation. Over the next 2 months, they fell into a comfortable rhythm. Coffee shop mornings, weekend walks in the park, and dinners at modest restaurants where Dan always insisted on splitting the bill. Emma found herself sharing things she rarely told anyone, her dreams of starting her own design studio, her fears of never being good enough, the childhood memory of her grandfather teaching her to draw. Daniel listened, treasuring these glimpses into her world. With Emma, he felt like himself for the first time in years. Not Daniel Harrington, billionaire CEO, but just Dan, a man with hopes and insecurities like anyone else. But as their relationship deepened, his dual life became increasingly difficult to maintain. He invented business trips to explain his absences when company emergencies required his attention. He redirected conversations whenever they veered too close to his actual circumstances. The lies of omission were beginning to weigh on him. The breaking point came on a rainy Tuesday evening. They had planned to meet at a new restaurant, but Daniel was trapped in an emergency board meeting as a hostile takeover attempt threatened Horizon Technologies. By the time he could break away, Emma had been waiting for over an hour, her calls going straight to his voicemail. He found her outside the restaurant, drenched and hurt. Emma, I'm so sorry. Don't. Her voice was quiet but firm. This isn't the first time, Dan. Whatever this is between us, it can't work if I'm the only one fully showing up. I can explain. Can you? Because I feel like I've told you everything about me, but I still know almost nothing about you. Where do you live? Who are your friends? You've never even told me your last name. The rain fell between them, each drop another secret kept. You're right, Daniel finally said. There are things I haven't told you. Important things. Emma shook her head, tears mixing with raindrops. I don't need your life story, Dan. I just need honesty. I need to know if what we have is real. It's the most real thing in my life, he said, and meant it. Then prove it. No more mysteries, no more vague answers. Just truth. Daniel nodded slowly. Tomorrow. Meet me at the coffee shop where we first met. I'll tell you everything. Emma studied his face for a long moment. One more chance, she said finally. That's all I have left to give. That night, Daniel paced his modest apartment, weighing his options. He could continue the charade, invent a more convincing backstory, maybe even create a fake apartment to show her. But the thought made him sick. Emma deserved better. Or he could tell her the truth and risk losing the only genuine connection he'd found in years. Would she believe him? Would she think he'd been playing some elaborate game? Worse, would knowing change how she saw him? By morning, he had made his decision. Emma arrived at the coffee shop precisely at 9, her heart pounding. Part of her expected Dan wouldn't show, that this would be the disappointing end to what had felt like something special. But he was there, sitting at a corner table, 2 coffees waiting. He looked different somehow, his posture straighter, his expression more serious. He wore a crisp button-down shirt instead of his usual hoodie. Thank you for coming, he said as she sat down. I said I would. Daniel took a deep breath. My name is Daniel Harrington. I'm the founder and CEO of Horizon Technologies. Emma stared at him blankly. Horizon Technologies, he repeated. The data security company? Recognition flickered in her eyes, followed quickly by confusion. Wait, that Horizon? The Fortune 500 company? Daniel nodded. That's not possible. Daniel Harrington is. She trailed off, pulling out her phone and typing rapidly. Her eyes widened as she looked from the screen to his face and back again. Oh my God. I know this is a lot to take in. A lot to take in? Emma's voice rose slightly. You're worth. She stopped, looking around before leaning forward to whisper, the internet says you're worth $11 billion. 11.4, as of yesterday's market close, Daniel said with a grimace. But that's not who I am. Not really. Then who are you? Because I thought I knew, but clearly I was wrong. Daniel reached for her hand, but she pulled back. Everything between us has been real, Emma. My feelings for you, our conversations, the connection we've built, that's all genuine. The only thing I hid was my background and my job. Only? Emma laughed incredulously. That's like saying the only thing the Titanic hit was just some ice. This isn't a small detail, Dan, or Daniel, I guess. I know. And I'm sorry for not being honest sooner. But try to understand, when people know who I am, everything changes. They want something from me, or they see me as a walking bank account, or they treat me differently. So you lied to me because you assumed I'd be like everyone else? The hurt in her voice was palpable. No, Daniel said firmly. I didn't tell you because I was afraid. Afraid of losing what we were building. Afraid you might not believe my feelings were genuine. The longer I waited, the harder it became to find the right moment. Emma sat back, processing. All those times you were late or cancelled, those weren't regular work emergencies, were they? No. Running a global company comes with unpredictable crises. And when I told you about my student loans and you just nodded sympathetically? When I talked about saving for months for my trip to Portland? Daniel winced. I wanted to help. So many times. But I knew offering money would change everything. Emma was quiet for a long moment. I need time to think about this. I understand. No, I don't think you do. Her voice was steady now. You've had years to come to terms with who you are. I've had 5 minutes to realize I've been dating someone completely different from who I thought. Not completely different, Daniel said softly. The man you've been getting to know, his thoughts, his values, his feelings for you, that's the real me. The bank accounts, the company, the public persona, that's just circumstance. Emma stood up. I need space to figure out what's real and what isn't. Please don't contact me for a while. Daniel nodded, his heart sinking. I'll respect that. But Emma, I meant what I said last night. What we have is the most real thing in my life. She looked at him one last time, her expression unreadable, before walking out the door. The next 3 weeks were the longest of Daniel's life. He threw himself into work, attending meetings he would normally handle remotely, reviewing projects that didn't require his attention. Anything to keep his mind occupied. His executive assistant, Marion, who had worked with him for 15 years, finally confronted him. With all due respect, sir, you look terrible. Daniel glanced up from his computer. Thank you for that assessment, Marion. It's a woman, isn't it? Daniel sighed. There was no point denying it, Marion had an uncanny ability to read him. Yes. The one you've been sneaking around with for months? The reason for all those mysterious personal appointments on your calendar? I wasn't sneaking around. I was just. He trailed off, realizing how it sounded. Living a double life? Marion supplied helpfully. Playing Prince and the Pauper? Something like that. Marion sat down across from him. And now she knows who you really are, and she's not speaking to you. Daniel nodded miserably. Did you ever consider that the problem isn't your money, but the fact that you weren't honest with her from the beginning? The words hit home. Daniel had been so focused on Emma accepting his wealth that he'd missed the more fundamental issue. He hadn't trusted her with the truth. What do I do now, Marion? His assistant smiled. For a brilliant businessman, you can be remarkably dense about personal matters. You apologize, properly, and then you give her the space to decide what she wants. Emma spent those same 3 weeks in a state of confusion. She'd searched Daniel Harrington online, finding countless articles about the tech genius who revolutionized data security, the philanthropist who donated millions to education initiatives, and the reclusive billionaire rarely seen at public events. Her friends were divided in their advice. He lied to you for months, Jess pointed out during their weekly dinner. That's a major red flag. But was it really lying? Countered Priya. He told you his real first name. He just omitted some details. Some details? Jess scoffed. Like being one of the richest men in the country? That's not a small omission. Emma sighed. I keep trying to imagine what I would have done in his position. If everyone I dated was after my money, wouldn't I eventually try to hide it too? Maybe, Jess conceded. But for months? The question isn't whether he was right to hide it, Priya said gently. The question is whether what you felt for him, for the person you got to know, was real. And whether that's worth fighting for. Emma thought about their conversations, the way Daniel, had listened to her dreams as if they mattered. How he'd remembered small details about her life that even her closest friends forgot. The connection she'd felt with him wasn't something she'd experienced before. I miss him, she admitted finally. The him I knew. I'm just not sure if that person really exists. On the 23rd day of their separation, Emma received a package at work. Inside was a single coffee cup sleeve with a handwritten note. The first time we met, you bought coffee for a stranger, expecting nothing in return. It was the kindest thing anyone had done for me in years. I've been trying to deserve that kindness ever since. I failed by not being honest with you, and I'm sorry. If you're willing to talk, I'll be at our coffee shop tomorrow morning at 9. No more secrets. Daniel. Emma stared at the note for a long time, running her finger over the familiar handwriting. Part of her wanted to ignore it, to protect herself from further hurt. But a larger part needed answers, needed to know if the connection they'd shared was worth salvaging. The next morning, she found herself walking toward the coffee shop, her steps slowing as she approached. Through the window, she could see him, Daniel Harrington, billionaire CEO, sitting alone at their usual table, looking as nervous as she felt. He wasn't wearing a disguise this time. His clothes were simple but clearly expensive, and he made no attempt to hide his face from the other patrons. A few people were giving him curious glances, some taking surreptitious photos with their phones. Emma took a deep breath and pushed open the door. Daniel stood immediately when he saw her, hope and anxiety battling in his expression. You came. I'm still not sure why, Emma admitted, sitting down. Thank you for giving me a chance to explain. He hesitated. I had a whole speech prepared, but now that you're here, it seems inadequate. Just tell me the truth, Daniel. All of it this time. He nodded. I grew up in Ohio, parents both factory workers. Everything I told you about my childhood was true. I really did build my first computer from parts one found at the junkyard. I really did get a scholarship to MIT. Emma listened silently as he continued. What I didn't tell you was what?